Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be diving into the world of greenhouse gas accounting.
Specifically, the ISO 14064 standards.
Yeah,
It's a really, it's becoming more and more
I was
important
just going to say,
for businesses.
it feels like
just individuals.
it feels like this was a super niche topic even just a few years ago, and now it's everywhere.
It is. It's true. You see it in like corporate reports and investment decisions, even product labels. There's a real shift happening as I think the world is getting more serious about tackling climate change.
For sure, and we have some very cool sources for this deep dive.
Yeah?
We have excerpts from the actual ISO 14064 standards themselves,
Ooh.
parts 1, 2, and 3.
Wow.
And we also have a presentation about a training workshop on this topic happening in Kuala Lumpur.
Oh, cool. That's,
Yeah.
that workshop really caught my eye.
I know. It seems like a hot career path right now.
Yeah.
RM 30,000 per project.
Yeah. Sign me up.
But before we get ahead of ourselves,
Right.
what is ISO 14064? Why does it matter?
Yeah.
And how does it work?
Okay. Well, ISO stands for the International Organization for Standardization.
Okay.
And they basically set the standards for all sorts of industries all around the world.
Okay.
So they're making sure that things are measured and reported consistently.
Like the referees of the global economy.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so when it comes to greenhouse gases, ISO 14064 is their playbook.
Okay.
It's a family of standards that it gives us a framework for quantifying, monitoring, reporting, and verifying GHG emissions.
So it's a series of standards,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's not just one.
It's not just one standard.
Okay.
There's ISO 14064-1, which focuses on how organizations calculate and report their emissions.
Okay.
It's like making a GHG inventory.
Got it.
It's a snapshot of their carbon footprint.
So this is if, like, a company wants to understand its climate impact.
Totally.
40641 is where they'd start.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Then there's 14064-2, which is all about GHG projects. Okay. These are initiatives that are specifically designed to either reduce emissions or remove GHGs from the atmosphere.
So things like planting forests,
Yeah.
investing in renewable energy,
Yes.
Okay.
Just like that.
carbon capture technology.
Exactly. And so 14064-2 provides this framework for designing, monitoring, and reporting on those projects in a way that's credible and transparent.
So we have the organization level in 14064-1, and then the project level in 14064-2.
Yes.
Okay.
And then last but not least, there's 14064-3.
Uh-huh.
And this one is all about verification.
Okay.
This lays out the process for having like independent auditors come in and check if the claims being made in those other two reports, 1 and 2, are accurate
Okay.
and meet the ISO standards.
So like a referee making sure everyone's playing by the rules.
Exactly. And this is super important for building trust and credibility,
Got it.
especially when you're thinking about like carbon markets and stuff like that.
Yeah, this whole system of standards is pretty wild.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, I'm a little overwhelmed
Yeah.
by all these numbers and acronyms. It's understandable. I'm sure it'll become clear as we go.
Yeah.
But I think before we go any deeper, I want to step back and ask,
Yeah.
why does this even matter?
Right.
Why should the average person care about this?
That's a great question. And honestly, there are so many reasons why this is relevant to like literally everyone, not just businesses or environmental experts.
Like what?
Well, for example, as awareness of climate change grows, so does the demand for professionals who can quantify and manage these emissions. It's becoming a core part of corporate ESG reporting.
Okay.
And it's a hot career path.
That's right. RM 30,000 per project.
Exactly.
I haven't forgotten.
So think about it.
Yeah.
Businesses are increasingly required to report on their GHG emissions.
Okay.
This is driven by regulations and investor pressure. So knowing your way around ISO 14064 means that you could actually understand these reports.
Gotcha.
You can see through greenwashing.
Right.
And you can make more informed decisions, whether you're a consumer, an investor, or even an employee.
It's like a superpower to decode the environmental impact of, like, companies and products.
Exactly. And this knowledge is just so valuable in today's world, where sustainability is becoming a key factor in everything.
Okay, you've convinced me.
Okay.
It's important.
Good.
But sometimes it does feel like you need a PhD
Right.
to even scratch the surface of this.
Yeah, I hear you.
It's a lot.
And that's why we're here,
Yeah.
to try to break it down and make it accessible.
Okay, good.
So let's start by demystifying some of the key concepts and definitions that are used in these standards.
Okay, yeah.
Go with it. So, first of all, it's really important to understand the basic building blocks of greenhouse gas accounting.
Okay.
We talk about sources, sinks, and reservoirs.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it like a bathtub, all right?
Okay.
Sources are like the faucets,
Got it.
adding GHGs to the atmosphere. Sinks are like the drain.
Hmm.
They're absorbing GHGs.
Got it.
And reservoirs are like the tub itself. They're storing those gases.
Okay, so like burning fossil fuels is a source, forests are a sink,
Yes.
and the ocean is a reservoir.
Perfect.
Okay.
Now, when we talk about emissions, we distinguish between direct and indirect emissions.
This is where it gets tricky for me.
Okay.
I always get those mixed up.
So think about it this way.
Okay.
Direct emissions are like your personal carbon footprint, the emissions from your car or your home heating.
Mm-hmm.
Indirect emissions are like the carbon footprint of all the things you buy and the services you use.
Okay.
So if I buy a product that was manufactured in a factory that was powered by like coal,
Right.
those emissions are part of my indirect footprint.
Gotcha. It all comes back to me.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that's why these standards encourage us to look beyond just the obvious sources and to consider the entire life cycle of products and services.
This is making me think about that training workshop in Kuala Lumpur.
Yes.
Because they were focusing on the palm oil industry, right?
Yeah.
Isn't palm oil supposed to be, like, bad for the environment?
Yeah, it's true.
How does ISO 4264 play into that?
Palm oil has a very complicated reputation,
Yeah.
and rightfully so.
Yeah.
Deforestation for palm oil plantations has been a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions.
So how does it help?
Well, it's not like a magic solution, but it's definitely a crucial step. By bringing like standardized GHG accounting to the palm oil industry, you're creating transparency and accountability.
Companies can't hide their impact anymore.
Right.
Okay.
Think of ISO 42064 as like this powerful lens that allows us to see the true carbon footprint of palm oil production.
What does that lens reveal?
Well, remember we talked about direct and indirect emissions?
Yeah.
ISO 42064 helps us pinpoint those emissions throughout the palm oil supply chain.
So we're talking about, like, the clearing of forests to make way for plantations.
Yes, exactly. Okay.
And ISO 14064 actually provides methodologies to quantify those emissions.
Wow.
And it takes into account things like, the type of forest,
Oh, wow.
the carbon that's stored in the trees and soil, even the emissions from burning the cleared vegetation.
Oh, that's comprehensive.
Yeah,
What about the actual, production process of the oil?
that's included too.
Okay.
So things like fertilizer use, processing, transportation, all of those contribute to the carbon footprint.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, huh?
Totally.
Wow.
And so the point is that by shining a light on all these different emissions, ISO 14064 empowers all the stakeholders, from producers to consumers,
Okay.
to make informed decisions.
So a palm oil producer could use it to figure out where they need to reduce their impact.
Absolutely.
And a consumer could use it to be like, okay, I'm going to buy from the company that's actually doing the right thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's adding credibility
Exactly.
to sustainability efforts. Yes, and this combination of the standards and these certifications is really what can drive real change.
Okay.
Not just in palm oil, but in other industries as well.
Where else are we seeing these standards make a difference?
Well, one big area is renewable energy.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
As the world transitions to clean energy, we need a way to measure that, right?
We do. We need a way to track and verify those emissions reductions.
Okay.
And that's where ISO 140642 comes in.
Okay.
It provides that framework for assessing the environmental integrity of these projects.
Walk me through it. How would it be used?
Okay, so let's take a wind farm, for example.
Okay.
First, you would establish like a baseline scenario.
Okay.
What would the emissions have been if that wind farm had never been built?
So we're assuming they would have kept using fossil fuels.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so that baseline is what you're going to use to measure the project's impact.
Got it.
And so then, once the wind farm is up and running, you would track the electricity generation and calculate the emissions avoided.
So for every kilowatt hour they generate, they offset a certain amount of emissions.
Exactly.
Okay.
And ISO 14064 provides those methodologies to make those calculations really accurate and reliable.
What's to stop companies from inflating their numbers?
That's where that independent verification comes in.
Okay.
That's the 140643.
Right, the auditors.
The auditors. They come in,
Got it.
they scrutinize all the data, the methodologies. They might even do site visits
Wow,
to
okay.
make sure that everything's on the up and up.
So it's like a financial audit, but for emissions reductions.
Exactly. And this really rigorous verification process is what gives credibility to the claims being made.
Got it.
And it builds trust in the whole carbon market.
So why would a company even bother going through all this?
Well, there are a few key motivators.
Okay.
First, a lot of companies are setting these really ambitious sustainability goals, and they need a way to actually measure their progress
Got it.
and demonstrate accountability.
It's not enough to just talk the talk anymore.
No, you got to walk the walk.
Okay.
And ISO 14064 provides that measuring stick.
I like that analogy.
And then second,
Okay.
a lot of parts of the world are starting to implement different regulations and incentives related to carbon emissions.
Right.
So companies might need to actually report their emissions
Okay.
to comply with those regulations or to qualify for those incentives.
So there's a business case for it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then finally, there's just this growing demand for transparency from consumers and investors.
Yeah, people want to know where this stuff comes from now.
Yeah, people want to know the environmental impact of the products they're buying and the companies that they're supporting.
So sustainability is becoming a selling point.
Totally.
Got it.
Companies that can demonstrate their commitment to sustainability
Okay.
and back it up with like robust GHG accounting,
Mm-hmm.
they have a real competitive advantage.
Okay. This is all making sense now.
Okay.
But is this enough? Will these standards be enough to actually solve the climate crisis?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
ISO 14064 is definitely a really powerful tool,
Mm-hmm.
but it's only one piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
We need a much more multi-pronged approach.
Like what?
Well, we need policy changes.
Mm-hmm.
We need technological innovations, for
Right.
sure, and behavioral shifts.
It's going to take all of us.
It's going to take all of us.
Okay.
But ISO 14064 is a really important part of that.
Okay, so it's an important ingredient in the recipe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by understanding these standards,
Mhm.
we can actually all play a role in making progress,
Yeah.
whether we're consumers, investors, or, professionals in this growing field
Yeah.
of GHG management.
This conversation's been really enlightening. I feel like I've learned a lot.
Awesome.
I think we need to digest all this, though.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break,
Okay.
and then when we come back, we can delve deeper into that verification process.
Yeah.
Explore how ISO 14064 is shaping the future of the carbon market.
Sounds good. We'll be back in a flash with more deep dive insights. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about like the what and the why
Yeah.
of ISO 14064.
Right.
But I'm curious about the how is this actually playing out in the real world?
That's the exciting part.
Yeah.
It's not just abstract concepts.
Right.
These standards are actually shaping decisions and actions across industries.
Last time we were talking about that KL workshop,
Right.
that was focusing on the palm oil industry.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking because, like, isn't palm oil supposed to be, like, this environmental villain?
Yeah, it's true.
How does ISO 14064 play into all that?
So palm oil has a complicated reputation, and rightfully so. I mean, deforestation for palm oil plantations has been a huge contributor to greenhouse gas emissions.
So can it help? Can it actually make palm oil sustainable?
I mean, it's not like a magic solution, but it's a crucial step.
Oh.
By bringing standardized GHG accounting to the palm oil industry, ISO 14064 is helping to create transparency and accountability.
So companies can't hide their impact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think of ISO 14064 as like this powerful lens that allows us to see the true carbon footprint of palm oil production.
What is that lens reviewer?
Well, remember when we were talking about direct and indirect emissions?
Yeah.
ISO 14064 actually helps us pinpoint those emissions throughout the entire palm oil supply chain.
So, like, the emissions from clearing the forests to make way for the plantations.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Okay.
And ISO 14064 provides like methodologies to quantify those emissions.
Wow.
And it takes into account factors like the type of forest,
Okay.
the carbon that's stored in the trees and soil,
Wow.
even the emissions from burning the cleared vegetation.
That's really comprehensive.
Yeah.
What about the emissions from, like, the process itself?
Those are covered too.
Okay.
Things like fertilizer use, processing, and transportation. All of those contribute to the carbon footprint.
So we're really getting a full picture.
Yeah, you're like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the whole point.
Right.
By shining a light on all those emissions,
Yeah.
ISO 14064 is empowering everyone, from producers to consumers, to make really informed decisions.
So a palm oil producer could use this to figure out how to be better.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They could use ISO 14064 to, like, identify the biggest emissions hotspots in their operations.
Okay.
And find ways to reduce their impact.
So, like, what could they do?
Well, they could optimize fertilizer use.
Okay.
They could adopt more energy-efficient processing methods. They could even look at, like, renewable energy sources for their operations.
And then a consumer, on the other hand, could be like, okay, I'm going to buy from this company and not that company.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they can see who's doing the right thing.
And those sustainability labels,
Right.
like RSPO and MSPO, they become even more meaningful when they're backed up by, like, robust GHG accounting.
So it's adding a layer of credibility to the sustainability.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've seen how this can work in the palm oil industry. What about other industries?
Well, one area where we're seeing a huge impact is in renewable energy.
Okay.
So think wind farms, solar installations, hydropower projects.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
As we transition to clean energy,
we need a way to track that.
we need a way to measure it.
And verify those emissions reductions.
Okay.
And so that's where ISO 140642 comes in.
Okay.
Gives us that framework for assessing the environmental integrity of those projects.
How would it be used for something like that?
Okay, let's take a wind farm as an example.
Okay.
So first you'd have to establish, like, a baseline scenario.
Okay.
So what would the emissions have been if that wind farm had never been built?
So we're assuming they would have just kept using fossil fuels.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that baseline is what we use to measure the impact of the project.
Yeah.
Then, once the wind farm is operational, you would actually track the electricity generation
Okay.
and calculate the emissions that have been avoided by using wind power instead of, fossil fuels.
So, like, for every kilowatt hour of wind energy they generate, they offset a certain amount of emissions.
Exactly. Yeah. And ISO 14064 actually provides the methodologies to make those calculations accurate and reliable.
But couldn't a company, like, inflate their numbers?
That's where that independent verification comes in.
Okay, right.
The ISO 140643.
Right, the auditors.
The auditors. They come in and scrutinize everything. The data, the methodologies. They might even do site visits.
To make sure it's all legit.
Exactly, to make sure that everything is above board.
So it's like a financial audit, but for emissions reductions.
Exactly.
Yeah, that.
And this rigorous verification process is what gives credibility to the claims being made and builds trust in the entire carbon market.
Why would a company go through all this? What's the point?
Well, there are, like, a few key motivators.
Okay.
A lot of companies now are setting these really ambitious sustainability goals, and they need a way to actually measure their progress.
Okay.
And demonstrate accountability.
Right, they have to prove it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so ISO 14064 provides, like, that measuring stick.
It does. It sets the bar.
Right, exactly. Okay. And then second, a lot of parts of the world are starting to implement different regulations and incentives related to carbon emissions.
Okay.
So companies might need to actually report their emissions to comply with the regulations or to qualify for certain incentives.
Gotcha.
And then finally, there's just this growing demand for transparency.
For sure.
From consumers and investors.
Yeah. People want to know what they're buying.
Yeah. They want to know the environmental impact of the products they're buying and the companies they're supporting.
So, like, sustainability is becoming like a differentiator.
Totally.
Yeah.
Companies that can show that they're committed to sustainability and back it up with, like, robust GHG accounting, they have a real competitive advantage.
Okay, this is all making sense.
Good.
But is ISO 14064 enough?
Right.
Is it enough to solve the climate crisis?
That's a great question. It's like the million-dollar question.
I know. It's what I keep coming back to. Because it's like, this is great. This is all great.
It is.
But is it enough?
Well, I mean, ISO 13064 is a really powerful tool, but it is only one piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
We need a much more multi-pronged approach.
Okay. Like what?
Well, we need things like policy changes, we need technological innovations, and we need behavioral shifts.
Right. It's gonna take everybody.
It's going to take everyone.
Okay, so it's an ingredient in the recipe.
It is.
Okay.
But it's an important one. And the thing is, by understanding these standards, we can actually all play a role in driving progress.
That's true.
Whether we're consumers, investors, or, professionals in this growing field of GHG management.
I've learned a lot in this conversation. I really have.
Okay, I'm glad.
But I also think we need a moment to digest
Yeah, I agree.
all of this information.
Let's take a quick break.
Okay.
And then when we come back, we can talk more about that verification process
Right.
and how ISO 14064 is shaping the future of the carbon market.
Sounds good. We'll be back in a flash with more deep dive insights. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've talked about the basics of ISO 14064, and we've talked about how it's being used in palm oil and renewable energy.
All sorts of real-world applications.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see how these standards are actually making an impact.
It is. It's not just theory.
Right, exactly.
That's really changing things.
But there's one piece we haven't really talked about in depth.
Right.
And that's verification.
Yeah, that's a big one.
We've mentioned it.
We have.
But I'm still a little fuzzy on how it all works.
Oh.
What does it even mean to have your GHG emissions verified?
So you can think of it kind of like getting your financial statements audited.
Okay.
You're bringing in an independent expert to come in and make sure everything is accurate.
Got it.
And above board.
So it's like a GHG accounting police force, making sure nobody's cooking the books.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
But really, verification is it's essential for building trust and credibility in this whole world of greenhouse gas accounting.
Okay, but who are these verifiers?
Right.
And what are they looking for?
So the verifiers are actually accredited third-party organizations.
Okay.
And they have expertise.
Got it.
In GHG accounting and the ISO 14064 standards.
So they're like the forensic accountants.
Yeah.
Of the sustainability world.
Exactly. And so they're going to come in and scrutinize every aspect of a company's GHG statement.
Okay.
Everything from their data collection methods to the calculation methodologies to the reported emissions.
It sounds intense.
It can be.
Okay.
They're going to pore over all sorts of documents, conduct interviews.
Right.
They might even visit facilities to verify the information firsthand.
So they're not just sitting at a desk.
Yeah.
They're actually going out.
Yeah, they're going out in the field.
Okay.
They might visit factories, power plants, forestry projects.
Wow. Okay.
Wherever those emissions are taking place.
And when they do that, what are they looking for?
Evidence.
Okay.
Proof that the data and the claims that are being made in that GHG statement are accurate and consistent with the ISO 14064 standards.
So, for example, if a company says that they're reducing their emissions from their manufacturing process,
right,
the verifier would want to see proof of that?
Exactly.
Like actual data?
Yeah, like data from their energy monitoring systems or, evidence of process improvements they've made.
Okay. And they're also looking for red flags, right?
Yeah, exactly. Things that might be inconsistent.
Okay.
That might require further investigation.
What happens if they find something?
Well, if they find something fishy,
yeah,
they're going to raise those issues with the company.
Okay.
Ask for, clarification.
Got it.
Or more evidence.
Okay.
In some cases, they might even adjust the reported emissions if they find, significant discrepancies.
So there's a lot of back and forth.
There can be.
It's not just a one-time thing.
No, it's a process. It's a pretty rigorous process, actually.
So this whole verification process, it's about making sure that the data is accurate.
Totally. It's all about the integrity of the GHG data.
And that's especially important when it comes to the carbon market.
The carbon market, exactly. Because buyers want to know that the emissions reductions that they're, paying for are real and verified.
Okay, so it's about transparency and accountability.
Yes.
When it comes to actually buying and selling these emissions reduction.
Exactly. It's about making sure that the system is robust and trustworthy.
It's without this verification, the whole thing falls apart.
What?
It'd be like a house of cards.
It's a good analogy.
And as this whole market grows, this is only going to become more and more important.
Absolutely. As more and more companies set these ambitious emissions reduction targets, and as more countries implement carbon pricing mechanisms, the demand for this high-quality verified emissions data is just going to skyrocket.
This has been a wild ride.
Yes.
I feel like I've learned so much about this whole world.
I'm glad.
Of GHG accounting and these ISO 10864 standards.
It's a fascinating world, and it's only getting more and more relevant. as we move forward.
Where should people go
Yeah.
if they want to learn more?
Well, there are some really great resources out there, like the ISO standards themselves are available. You can find online courses and training workshops like the one we talked about in Kuala Lumpur.
Yeah, that one sounds really cool.
It does. And even if you just want to stay informed,
Right.
there are tons of like articles and podcasts.
We're one of them.
That's
and websites and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah. Get involved.
And get involved.
The more we understand all of this, the better equipped we'll all be to kind of navigate the challenges and opportunities of a rapidly changing world.
What's the one thing you want listeners to take away from all this?
That's a good question.
I know, it's a tough one.
I think the main takeaway is that understanding GHG accounting and the ISO 44064 standards, it's not just some niche skill anymore. It's really becoming essential knowledge for anyone who wants to be part of the solution to the climate crisis.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So whether you're working in a company or you're just, an individual who's trying to make informed decisions, this stuff is becoming more and more important.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So I think that's about it for this deep dive.
Yeah, that's all the time we have for today.
We hope you've enjoyed.
We hope you learned something.
This exploration of ISO 14064 and the whole world of greenhouse gas accounting.
It's been a journey.
It has.
And we'll see you on the next deep dive.